This video picks up after we have already removed the brake caliper, rotor, and axles. Please follow the link provided at the end of this video for step-by-step instructions on those procedures. You will need a bearing puller to remove the wheel flange. Most auto parts stores will lend you one or rent you one for a small fee. Depending on the condition of your car, you may be able to pull the hub with a few large pry bars and a couple of good pulls. Make sure the pry bars are seated on the hub flange mount and not on the parking brake apparatus, yellow arrows. Either way you remove the flange, the inner race of the bearing, red arrow, will more than likely come off with the wheel flange, leaving the ball bearings in the bearing exposed, yellow arrow. This is normal and fine since you are replacing the bearing anyways. You will need to remove the race, red arrow, from the hub with a bearing puller, air hammer, or you can carefully cut it with a Dremel and knock it off. Use care not to damage the hub while doing this. With the inner race off, check the condition of the flange, red arrow. There is a very large circlip in the groove inside the hub. Use the proper large circlip tool as the openings are far apart, red arrow. Do not forget to be wearing your safety goggles. Use care and the right tool to remove the circlip. It is quite beefy and you do not want to try and pry it out with screwdrivers. The rear hubs are NLA, no longer available, and if you do find a good used one, it will cost you a fortune. Use the right tool and save yourself the trouble. You will need a bearing puller to remove the bearing from the trailing arm, red arrow. Your local auto store will probably have some sort of tool rental or free program that you can use. There are lots of ways out there on the internet, including our forums, on how to make your own puller for a little money from a hardware store. While you are welcome to follow these instructions, the fit between the inner hub on the trailing arm and the outer ring on the bearing is very small and requires a lot of force to pull the bearing out. Porsche trailing arms might as well be made of unobtainium now, so we recommend using a proper bearing puller for the job. With the bearing removed, clean the inside and check for any damage or cracks. The section of the hub that sits in the bearing can get some discoloring in it, but should be free from nicks or any heat damage. The hub sits inside the inner races on the bearing. The bearing fails and the hub starts spinning around, the inner race damage can occur. Note this hub is fine, it's just discolored from the grease from the failed bearing. Pull the new bearing out from the freezer. Use some form of heat to heat the hub on the trailing arm. If you are using a torch, the hub is hot enough when you place a drop of water on the top and it sizzles, yellow arrow. Do not overheat the hub. With the hub hot and the bearing cold, insert the bearing and push it in as far as you can by hand, making sure to get it level and even. Depending on the condition of the vehicle, the bearing will either slip right in or just to the beginning edge, yellow arrow. The bearing will now need to be tapped or pressed in until flush with the hub. If you are tapping it in with a hammer, you must place something over the bearing to protect it and tap it in evenly, working gently around the outer ring of the bearing. If you are pushing it in with the bearing tool, make sure that the disc you use only applies pressure to the outer ring on the bearing. Pressing the bearing in with the inner ring will destroy the bearing and you will have to start all over. Press the bearing in until it is fully seated and flush with the flange on the hub, red arrow. Use a bearing tool to press the hub into the new bearing. Keep in mind that you must support the bearing on the back side using the inner race of the bearing. If you support the bearing with the outer race, only the hub can push out the inner race and destroy the bearing. Installation of all other components is the reverse of removal. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and check out another video in this series.